This is Kara from KB Crochet. This tutorial will show you how to make yarn from a button-down shirt. In order to do this, you're going to need a button-down shirt and scissors. Optionally, you may also want to use a rotary cutter and a cutting mat. The first step is to cut off the sleeves, the collar, the button strips, and any seam across the back of the shirt, along with any tags or extra buttons. You're going to start by laying the shirt out flat, and then you're going to cut along the seams for the sleeves on each side. You're also going to cut off the collar. After that, you're going to want to go through and cut off some of the extras, like the little buttons that are underneath the collar, the tag, and the pocket. You're also going to want to cut off the strip that has the buttonholes and the strip that has the buttons, cut through the shoulder seams. And if it's a men's dress shirt or some women's dress shirts, there may be a seam across the back to cut as well. Step 2 is to separate the side panels from the back panel. To do this, you'll lay out the big piece of shirt you have left and cut along the seams underneath the armholes on either side. That will give you 2 side panels and the back panel. For step 3, you're going to cut the back panel. You can use either your rotary cutter for this step, or you can use your scissors. You may also want to have like a ruler or a yardstick to help with your straight edges, but that's optional as well. You're going to start by folding the back panel in half. I like to fold it in half so that the armholes match up. That way it's the most symmetrical. You will have to do typically a few more cuts this way, but again, because it's symmetrical, I think it's easier to cut. And it doesn't really matter which way you orient it on your cutting mat, but you'll just want to make sure it's as smooth as possible. You don't want to have those wrinkles in there. Normally I would lay it out this way so that I've got more space for cutting, but since I have the video set up, we're going to go ahead and put it back the other way. So then what you're going to do, and I'm going to do mine with a rotary cutter, but again, you can use scissors for this, is line it up with the grid. That's particularly helpful if you don't have a lined pattern or a checked pattern, because you're going to make those lines vertically up from that center cut. And then if you're going to use the ruler or the yardstick, you're going to go ahead and grab that and line it up. And you're going to want to, using your grid, make sure that you're going about 1 inch to 1.5 inches apart. I typically do about 1.5 inches if I'm going to do like a basket or something. And then you'll just slice from the bottom up until there's about 1 inch or 1.5 inches left at the top. You don't want to make the top too thin because this material will just keep tearing. If you've ever torn up bed sheets, you know what I'm talking about. It tears very easily. If it does tear, it's not a problem. And then you'll just keep moving that along and going across. You can be very precise with it, but if you're going to make like a rag basket or a rag bag, you don't have to be exact. It's okay if they're not all a uniform width, or if you, like I said, if you get a little too close to the top, you just reattach it if it separates. So when I'm doing this, I like to use the straight edge when I don't have like stripes or plaids or checks, but because this is a checkered pattern, I typically don't use the straight edge. So I'm going to go ahead and do this like I normally would. It's much faster too. And you'll just keep that up until you get to the end of the fabric. I don't always get to the very end when I'm starting, and so sometimes I have to go back through and separate the ends there. That's what I was just doing. And then once you get to the end, you're going to open it up. You'll see it's still all in one piece because you didn't go all the way to the other end. And you've got all these slits in the middle. And what you're going to do is lay it out all the way. Sometimes they get a little tangled up. And then you're going to go across every other one and cut it all the way to the end. And make sure it is every other one, otherwise you'll end up with a bunch of just little strips or loops. And make sure it's not twisted so you don't get onto the wrong one. And then also make sure you get all the way to the end there. And then once you're done, you're going to flip it over. Oh, I had some that I didn't get all the way cut through. I missed an end, and then I missed some center stitches, or sorry, center cuts. So then on the opposite end, you're going to cut through on the opposite places you cut on the first one. So if you started on the very first strip, you're going to go to the second. If you cut across on the same ones, you're going to end up with loops, which is not what you want. So you want to make sure you're cutting on opposite so you get like a zigzag. And everything stays in one piece. Again, make sure you don't have it twisted up. Good. Then once you get to the end, you can start trimming up. Like here, we've got kind of a pointy end on the other side. And we're just going to round that out. And you can round out each of your little like corner pieces. Sometimes when you crochet things like a basket or a rug, those little ends are going to come up, and you can just trim them off when you crochet if you don't do it now. Or if you need to trim them more, and you can just do that as you crochet along. You'll just keep winding. I'm using an extra large shirt here, and I typically get anywhere from about 33 to 35 yards out of one of these. It depends on how thick I make the cuts and if there's any holes in the shirt that I have to avoid, or how much of the shirt is usable. Good. And you'll just keep repeating that until you get all the way to the end. For the fourth step, you're going to cut the side panels, and if you choose to, the sleeves and any remaining panels or pieces that you would like to cut. To do a side panel, you're going to start by folding it. And this one I just fold from the bottom up. And you'll note that I only go as far as the shortest portion so that I can see where my overlap is. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut, again, the same width. And we're going to go about to an inch or an inch and a half away from the top. And you only count the shortest part of the shirt. So you're going to go ahead and cut up to an inch and a half or an inch away from the edge of the shortest part of the shirt. And you'll go ahead and do that all the way across, just like this. And once you get to the end, you'll unfold it. And then for some of these strips, which there's a lot of extra, you're going to just go ahead and finish the rest of the way. Then, once you're done, you're going to do just like you did with the back panel, and you're going to go ahead and cut across on every other one. Good. Then you're going to flip it around. And do the same thing on the other side. And again, you're going to want to make sure you're going on the opposite lines as from the other side so that you don't end up with just strips or rings, but you keep it in one long piece. You may get some odd shapes from the side panels or from some of the extra pieces like the sleeves, but you can always just trim up so that things are a little bit nicer and cleaner. Good, and then when you're done, you can just go ahead and trim the ends again, or trim the corners off. And what I typically do is I will join that end with the end from the other ball, and I do that by just knotting them together. You can sew them if you're making something and you don't want the extra knots in, but what I do is I just knot it 2 or 3 times until I pull it tight, and then I trim off the ends and just make sure it's secure. And that's the same thing earlier when I talked about not cutting too close to the top edge so that it doesn't tear. If something does tear, you can just tie it back on. But you want to avoid that if you can, just because the knots mean you have more ends that you have to deal with when you're working in your project like that. Like these I trimmed pretty close. And then you just keep rolling it on the ball that you started from the back panel. And again, you can trim as you go, or if you want to trim these as you crochet, it doesn't really matter. Either one is fine. I've done both and they work about the same. Good. We'll just go ahead and, oh, there we go. Some of these little scraps you can just clear out of the way. But if you have bigger pieces, like when you cut off the sleeves, or if you have one of those back seams and you've got a small panel from the top of the back, you may want to cut those as well. To do the sleeves, you're going to remove the cuffs first, and you're also going to cut open on the seam. This is much easier to use the scissors for, so that you're not worrying about cutting through 2 layers with your rotary cutter. Good, then you can lay that flat, and then if there's buttons or any seams around, you can cut those off. I also tend to cut off if there's just a little bit of thickness from where the main seam is. I'll cut that off too. That's what I was trimming there. And then you just fold it in half, and you're going to do the same thing you did with the side panel. And it doesn't matter which way you fold it, you just do whatever works the best for you. For this one, it makes more sense to fold it back like it was for the sleeve. And then I'm going to cut off the rest of that seam. This is where it was joined to the main part of the shirt. All right, then once you have it trimmed up, you're going to just do the same type of cuts you did with all of the other pieces. Again, I'm doing the same width here, about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And I'll do that all the way across. Good, and then when I get down here and we've got that split in the shirt, I'm just gonna go ahead and cut that off. And then you'll do the same technique you've done with the other portions and just cut along every other one. And then once you're done, you'll flip around to the other side. Or you can just go straight from there. For some of these smaller pieces, we'll just go straight up. Good. And then you can trim this up and you can join it to your ball, either by sewing the ends together or tying them, however you prefer to join it. The finished yarn will be either a bulky or super bulky weight yarn, depending on how wide you cut the strips. It's great for making baskets, rugs, mats, or bags, and you can use any type of fabric. It doesn't matter what the shirt's made out of, it just depends on your preference or what you have available. If you have any questions on this tutorial, please feel free to leave a question in the comment section for this video. If you check out my blog, you'll find other written patterns and crochet entries, or if you're interested in other patterns and tutorials, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you and happy crocheting.